I'm Safi.
Not Mystic.
And this is Lore Together. This is the podcast where a husband and wife duo come together to talk about all the things in stories, characters, backgrounds, and settings of video games because it's what we like to do together. We lore together.
Yes. And this is episode 24 of Lore Together. Mm-hmm. You may hear our little guy in the background, our newborn.
Our buddy, because he is so wee.
Yes. And he will hopefully sleep through this whole thing. But if not, well.
There you go.
We would like to hear from you about any games or lore or feedback or anything. You can contact us on Twitter at LoreTogether or via email loretogether@gmail.com.
And by the time this episode's out, we will have had a few posts on our new Instagram where we're actually celebrating Shop Small for Christmas. So not only reach us out on Instagram if you have any nerdy small businesses you'd like to give a shout out to, but follow us there to see where you might be able to get some great gift ideas or where to spend that extra $20 that your relative put in a card for you. So.
And if you would like to toss us any money and you appreciate this podcast, you can do that over on Patreon at patreon.com/loretogether, where you can do a per episode pledge. You'll get access to early episodes, early releases of the mini episodes, which we have to do another one still.
Yeah, we're going to have another one in the pipeline, hopefully still. Or you can see a backlog of our live streams. So if you feel like you missed our Skies of Arcadia live stream, you didn't really. You could just join the Patreon and see what we did.
So if you want to do that, we appreciate it. Also, we will appreciate if you are on any platform that allows reviews or ratings, such as Podchaser or iTunes. We would appreciate your reviews there as well. All right, we're going to do this thing again where I describe a scene.
And I have no idea what you're saying. Because that's apparently what we're doing now, to my chagrin. Chagrin sounds like a hip name.
Sounds like an alien. A chagrin.
A chagrin? I was thinking more like one of those crazy baby names for those people who they think they're going to be unique, and then they name their kid something like ampersand, and they don't even know what it means.
Yeah, okay, fair. Anyway, you wake up lying on the ground in the red grass on some far-flung planet in a spacesuit.
Okay. We have a poster in our house about a planet with red grass. So
we will give a link down to that in the description.
Yeah, it's from
or
NASA.
On Twitter.
It's pretty great.
Your suit slowly powers on as you look into the yellow sky. Above you see a snake-like creature flying lazily through the air.
Dragon Ball Z?
No. Questions are, where is your ship? Where are you? Who are you? Welcome to the Euclid Galaxy and No Man's Sky.
Okay, we are doing No Man's Sky. All right. Oh, man.
Because I covered it by saying I was going to play it this week with my friend, right?
No, when you said red grass and like a yellow sky, I was like, there are very few video games where that's going to actually apply. So,
to be fair, this may not be the scene you have when you start the game.
Right, because it's kind of almost randomly generated where you're going to be.
It is procedurally generated, yes.
Procedurally generated, excuse me.
And so this game came out in 2016, developed by Hello Games, a small indie developer from Guildford, England.
Oh my gosh. And did you, Mystic, I think I had you watch the video.
I'm going to get to it.
Okay, never mind.
Well, I'm not going to cover all of that. If you want to plug it, by all means, but let's get to it.
We'll get to it and then I'll plug it.
So it came out in 2016 for the PlayStation 4 and was a major disaster of a launch.
Yeah, like so bad.
We're not going to cover the launch and all that, but it's worth mentioning the complete redemption this game has had since its launch. You can find whole documentaries about the initial fall and then rise of this game, such as the one that you had mentioned.
I think that one was by a YouTuber called Internet Historian.
Yes.
And the reason...
I believe it's called the Fall and Rise.
Right. And the reason I like that one is that was the first time that I heard about how genuinely dedicated the development team and the lead on that team were to making sure this game was going to actually be a game that people wanted to play. And when I realized that, and they basically forego having big paychecks to put more money and more time into No Man's Sky, I have just total respect for that team. And I wish there were more developers that were willing to do things similar to this. You know, where we're not going to overwork everybody, but we're just going to start adding little things here and there to make it better.
And there's been 13 major updates over 100 updates in total, a lot of them smaller, but over 13 major updates now to flesh out the game and fix many of those shortcomings from launch.
Right.
Basically, the long and short of it, to cover in one sentence is they overpromised and then were rushed and weren't given the time to finish.
Yeah, I think it's one of those classic cases where a bigger publisher went to this indie developer and said, and gave time restraints and everything, and this small house developer had no idea what it was going to be like.
Their previous games were called the Joe Danger series, which is like a racing game, like a racing stunt man type game.
Much simpler thing to do. Mm-hmm. And then No Man's Sky, they were trying to do so much, and they did a lot for the first release.
Yeah, but in fact, most of the stuff we'll be talking about will be from that first release.
But at the same time, it wasn't what was promised. This poor guy, first of all, you need to be media trained if you're going to go do all these interviews. And I forget the lead developer's name.
Sean Murray.
Poor Sean Murray. Now, at first I kind of was like, oh, he's kind of a jerk and a crack. But when you realize the position he was in, he's the only person who was representing Hello Games.
Yeah.
You need to be trained to know how to speak to the media when you're going to be developing something this big. Like,
right.
You can't just be thrown out to the wolves like that. And unfortunately he was, and it shows. And
it backfired. Yeah. I personally love this game. I have played it for well over 150 hours now, which is not a lot compared to some people, but given my schedule.
And you've been playing it since the beginning. You were a lot more forgiving.
Mm-hmm. I think I picked up maybe 1 or 2 updates in.
But you were more forgiving of the situation at hand, I remember. Because there were still some people salty 2-3 years into its release. Mm-hmm. And you were like, no, this is actually getting somewhere and give it a chance.
Right. Broadly speaking, very broadly speaking, the game is one about exploration in an uncaring universe. Mm. That is selling it short.
Okay.
And the story of No Man's Sky is not what we're talking about today.
So, well, it sounds like the story is somewhat open-ended as well because of how it's set up currently. The
story is open-ended, but still has a finale to it that's also open-ended.
Mm. So what Mass Effect promised?
We're not going to be talking about the story of the player character. We're talking backstory in this episode. And not even all the backstory, because there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of fine detail that we're just not going to be able to have time to get into all of it.
Okay.
And they're always adding on to the personal story with little touches here and there. And the story touches on things like what is life, what is death, what is reality, and what is purpose.
So the themes are about meaning.
Yes.
Okay.
And there are choices in this game that, even though they do not affect more than a single character, a single soul, you will find yourself questioning. I have literally sat there staring at my choices at 2 different times in this storyline and agonizing over which choice was right. And of course, neither choice is right or wrong.
Right.
It's not, it's kind of that same feeling you get in Mass Effect or in Dragon Age, where you're choosing between 2 things and you want both to be right and you want both to happen. Like when you're choosing between, that first time you're playing Mass Effect and you're choosing between Caden Alenko and Ashley.
I forgot her name. Ashley Xenophobe. That's... I'm
Which is
sorry.
a shame because the voice actress is such a delight. Like she's great.
No, she's fantastic and she does a great job. And I appreciate what she did to how that character was, because that character was not written extremely well. Right, buddy?
Well, that character is not written extremely well because of the fact that midway through this game, you have to basically have them written off and then carbon swap them for the next 2 games.
Yeah, that was...
Anyway, that's a different sci-fi
You know
franchise.
what? We'll have to do an episode on Mass Effect. You have the books. You should do something that's got more information in the books, because then it helps tie in stuff that people who only play the games, like me, would not know.
Right.
So, like, what's his name? That assassin that broke into somebody's house.
No, we're not talking about him. We're not talking about Kai Lang.
No, but maybe we should talk about what was it? Commander.
Also, I think one of the books that he was in was basically struck from the canon.
You know what we should do, which on a Lore Together episode that would be different? The voice actor that does Commander Shepard's mentor, that voice actor.
Keith David?
Keith David. He's in so many video games.
We've touched on him already for some reason. I remember us doing that.
That should be our next mini episode, is Keith David. Keith David's awesome career.
Why did we talk about him before? We talked about him, and I can't remember what episode. Oh, yeah. He was in Mortal Kombat. He played Spawn.
That's right. And then after we did the recording of the Mortal Kombat episode, you and I watched every freaking riff that Spawn has against every fighter. And it was I can't even remember them all, but they were so entertaining.
So, all right. So if you want to do that, fine. We're here to talk about the background tapestry of No Man's Sky, which is woven by a half dozen different races, 5 of which are sentient.
Okay.
Almost all this comes from various monuments and ruins in the game. This is all kind of from the first release.
Okay.
I do not intend on spoiling much of the Atlas story here, which is the story of the game proper. Atlas is an entity that's there ubiquitous throughout the whole thing.
Okay.
And is throughout history as well. We're not going to really touch on that beyond the fact that Atlas is an entity. Okay? We're not going to get into the story of the game, is what I'm saying.
Okay. And I think for a game like No Man's Sky, that's perfectly fair. There's so much other stuff to touch upon.
To explain, though, a little bit, a tiny bit of Atlas, just for context. Atlas is that giant red orb that is ever present in the game's marketing and logo, and Atlas itself also deals with some heavy concepts.
Right.
It's worth noting that Atlas is a god to some, a false god to others, and a truth of it all kind of lies somewhere in between, and yet doesn't at the same time.
Okay.
We'll save that all for another episode.
Yeah, sure.
One caveat I should point out, the terms galaxy and universe and dimension are almost interchangeable in this game, so just keep that in mind.
Are you serious?
It makes sense when you play. But when we're doing the write-up, you just have to understand that those terms kind of all mean the same
thing. So galaxy, universe, and dimension are technically all the same thing.
Yes.
That's going to annoy me, but that's just because
they're
I'm
just
a nerd
used,
like that.
They're used a little loosely, I found, when I was researching. So I figured I should just explain that now so that people aren't confused as to what I mean by what. They're kind of all the same thing.
Okay.
Generally speaking, we're always referring to a galaxy. We're always referring to the Euclid Galaxy. When we're talking about universe or dimension or whatever, it's the Euclid Galaxy at this point.
Okay.
There are other galaxies. They are not factored into this part of the story.
Okay.
We have 3 distinct groupings of races of characters.
Okay.
First, we have the ones we deal with. Almost every NPC is one of these 3 races. They are the Gek, the Korvax, and the Viking.
Gek, Korvax, and Viking, like they go Viking?
VY''KEEN. Viking, right?
Viking. It just sounds so much like Viking.
It does.
It makes me...
They are also like the warriors ones, so...
Are they? And do they raid other planets for resources?
No.
Okay. So it just felt like it fit that way.
Right. We also have a second group of races, the travelers and the anomalies. We'll get to those in a minute.
Okay.
Lastly, we have the non-sentient race, the Sentinels.
The non-sentient race, the Sentinels, because of course these people just wanted to play with my head and language right now.
These are also called Aerons, Aerons in certain lore. I may call them that. I may call them Sentinels. Again.
Aerons. Aerons.
That's a tongue tripper of a word for me.
Yeah, because I can think of like Aeon.
Yeah.
But and then you add an R.
The R is what throws it, yeah.
It's Air Jordans? I don't know.
Obviously, there are more non-sentient races in the fauna of the world's universe, but they have no real lore attached to them beyond the fact that you can discover them.
Yeah, and they're kind of procedurally generated in the universe.
Let's get the easiest one out of the way first, the anomalies.
Okay.
For all intents and purposes, these are humans. You will never find an anomaly NPC. They are always other players.
Okay.
And players can also change their appearances to look like any of the other races. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Which I think I've seen that they're basically different helmet shapes for your player. Yeah.
Strangely enough, NPCs will refer to you as a traveler. There is more about the anomaly that's deep in the story of the game itself. I don't want to cover it here, but there's a lot more to them when it comes to Atlas and all that other stuff.
This feels like anytime we cover a lot of fantasy games where it's like, we could talk about this, but let's not.
Right.
So this is one of the first sci-fi games we're covering where the lore is that deep.
This is not as deep as, say, a Mass Effect or a Elder Scrolls could be, because it is so procedural. You have these deep histories, but within the game world, you kind of have a narrower field of focus.
Okay.
I just don't want to get involved in it because it's a lot of messages. It's a lot of big ideas and stuff that we'll be talking about more than this episode has time for.
Okay.
So let's move on to the travelers, since everyone calls you one anyway. Travelers come in different species. They're still a race of their own. Mm-hmm. Generally, these are all different heads, and the body type is a typical humanoid one. And they get some crazy heads. There's one guy who's got like a giant transparent skull, and he has like little filaments going to.
Whoa.
Yeah, it looks cool, and good alien design on that regard. Travelers are special. Just like anomalies, they are not exactly present in the universe alongside the player. Point in fact, the vast majority of travelers the player will meet are from other times, other dimensions, and even other universes. Again, using that term interchangeably.
Yeah.
As the barriers separating all of these things are growing thin and breaking down.
Okay.
Where they come from is known, but it spoils a great deal of the story and the discovery the player undertakes in the game proper. So I'm going to save that for the next time we cover this. That'll be our spoiler warning. We have a whole episode. We're not going to talk about it.
Right. And don't worry, audience. I'm not planning to play this anytime soon.
Except you are.
Except for the live stream for our patrons. Yes, of course.
Let's dig into the big three that we deal with in the game proper. And we'll start with the Gek. They are an amphibious species native to the water-rich system Balaran, close to the center of the Euclid Galaxy.
Okay.
They are now a mercantile race, though once were a deadly race bent on conquering. We'll get there. They are commonly corporate and plutocratic in their mannerisms, with many of their titles and ranks tied to trading and industrial terms. Broker, captain, sales Gek, toil Gek, underling, etc.
So they're like the Volus from Mass Effect in that regard.
Kinda. They're also short.
They're also short.
Yeah.
So they're definitely the Volus in that regard.
They communicate through verbal and olfactory means, meaning that one could also watch for particular aromas in conversation with them. In fact, if you irritate them, they'll give you like a sour smell and they'll...
Oh, really? Like,
yeah.
They just kind of like go and then walk away or something. Like
it's all done in text, so it's kind of hard. It's all done in text, so it's a little weird. But many Gek utilize certain dietary additives known collectively as Geknip, and crafted from the harvest of a weedy nip-nip plant in order to add specific fragrances to their emissions to elicit certain emotional responses in others. They kind of manipulate you with their pheromones and scents.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I think there's sometimes, like, if you do something right, the Gek will emit a pleasing odor and be relaxing and stuff like that.
But now this feels like it's kind of like the Elcor, where instead of using words to basically make sure the tone gets across, they're using scents. So they, like, oh, I'm really pleased with you. Here, smell some lavender.
Kind of.
You're being kind of a jerk. I'm going to smell like methane right now.
They're generally short with beaked mouths, like big beaks, and large heads with eyes on the side of their head or set very wide apart on like stalks and stuff. There's a lot of head diversity amongst the aliens. One might even call them cute if they didn't know their history, which we'll get into shortly.
Oh, so feeling cute might start a war right now or something like that?
Next, we'll cover the Korvax. They are a highly intellectual mechanical species that always want to know more about their own existence, everything in the universe, science, all that fun stuff.
So, it's funny that you said that, because with the word Korvax, it made me think that this was kind of a CAD competitor in the programming system. That's what a Korvax sounds like to me.
While native in a distant galaxy, the Korvax maintained several systems in the Euclid Galaxy for research purposes within the Edge and Outer Edge until a few centuries ago. Korvax are thin with mechanical heads, and the heads generally change to denote particular jobs that particular Korvax does. So basically, like, if you're like an astronaut Korvax, you have one particular type of style of head. It kind of changes based on your job.
So wait, is it their head's different, but it's mechanical, so they install their own head?
I think it's like you are given your purpose through your programming type stuff.
Oh, so are they not a biological race?
They are mechanical.
So
They're kind of a little bit of both. It's weird.
are they like the Borg in the sense that it's a mix of organic material? Well, I mean, not just the Borg. The Daleks from Doctor Who are the same idea. As
Are they?
like,
I thought they were mechanical.
oh no.
I'm not a Doctor Who fan,
So
so.
okay, for those of you who don't know Doctor Who, you've probably heard the Daleks exterminate, all that stuff. Inside, they're squishy, soft little beings, and part of the reason they are so stern and militant is because they're protecting their squishy, soft insides. I think the person who invented the Daleks was trying to make some kind of commentary about, socio-political stuff. My mother's a Whovian, so I'd have to ask her about that. But yeah, so, like the Daleks and the Borg, they're part organic, part mechanical. Is that true about the Korvax?
I believe there is an organic component because, well, I don't know. So there is a artifact that they talk about in the lore called a Korvax casing, which is prized because of its advanced bionic technology.
Interesting.
So with that, bionic implies that there is a biological component somewhere.
Right. No, agreed, yeah.
But generally speaking, they are seen as mechanical more than biological.
Okay.
Their titles are all task related and they are all entities. So you may have an analyst entity, a research entity, a scholar entity, each followed by their name. One notable NPC is priest entity Nada. Korvax commonly share their memories and discoveries with one another by uploading them into special platinum cubes that are then slotted into each other's brains to copy their contents. So that's part of the biological part.
Interesting. Now I'm thinking of Arium from Discovery. So
When a Korvax is dying, they will initiate the fading process, release their intellectual form into Korvax echoes, and a new entity will immediately be generated right after the old one has faded.
wow.
All Korvax are unique, but also connected via the convergence hive mind, though a few rare ones are disconnected.
Okay, so more like Borg in that sense.
Yeah, in that particular sense, typical hive mind. It's not a unique thing in
No,
sci-fi.
Hive, and we have to remember Hive Minds are not only not unique in sci-fi, they're not unique in nature either. I mean, there's plenty of hive beings that are insects, are, of course, are what first come to mind, but trees, you could think about them similarly in certain contexts as well.
Last of the big three is the Vy'keen. They are native to the Euclid Galaxy and originate from the Outer Edge. They are commonly viewed as hostile by other races, but they fight under a strict code of honor as decreed by the Vy'keen High Command. They comprise the strongest single military power in the galaxy.
Okay, so kind of course, bringing in, the imagery of the Klingons where they're a war race, but the reason that they are kept in check is because they have an honor code. Okay.
They are huge, relatively, and intimidating.
Okay.
Their bodies are that of a hunched and bulky humanoid, though the facial features of the Vy'keen can vary greatly. As is the case with all the races, there is a good deal of head and face diversity. Most notably, their jaws often protrude with either 3 or 2 lips, tusks, etc. Most of them have scaly around the green or yellow range.
Okay.
Also, their eyes are lower than their nose sometimes, if I remember correctly.
Oh, which of course, as a human being, that's kind of gross to think about.
Well, it depends. See, like sometimes, like they do kind of have their eyes.
Oh, because their eyes are on the side?
On some of them, yeah. Some have front-facing eyes. Some have side-facing eyes. It gets.
Okay.
Yeah. They are a warrior race with a reciprocal honor system, life debt, returning favors, etc.
Okay.
And they have a deep veneration for ancestors. Most names and titles are militaristic, cadet, enemy slayer, guard, Vy'keen at arms. So they primarily follow the teachings of Herc, a great warrior of legend or myth, though there is a schism with some following Nal.
I do love me a schism.
The last race is the Sentinels. They are a mechanical race of self-replicating simple AIs that act as guardians of the galaxy and can be as small as a little drone or come in larger sizes like giant walkers or even giant spaceships.
Okay, so there's a lot of variety with these dudes going
In fact,
on.
they will deactivate your pulse drive and dogfight you up in space. And there's actually two different wanted levels. Wanted level on the planet, and then you have a wanted level in space. And the only way to get rid of it in space is to land in a station. If you go back to the planet, it doesn't reset. So when you leave the planet next, you get attacked again.
Oh my gosh. So you're basically stuck on that planet unless.
Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, they are more of a dangerous nuisance than anything.
Yeah. So they're protectors of the universe, but who set them on that task?
I'm not going to get into that this time.
Okay.
That's stuff you learned in the game.
Okay.
To be fair, all this is stuff you learned in the game, but that's kind of something that ties directly into the big reveal.
Sounds like what should have been what happened to the Keepers on a Citadel of Mass Effect. that was just such a wasted plot point at the end. It made me very sad. And I'm sorry, everybody, I can't stop comparing it to Mass Effect because this is sounding little space opera-ish, and Mass Effect is
It's a space opera.
It's a space opera that it's the one I'm most familiar with.
So like I said, the Sentinels are a dangerous nuisance more than anything, but their impact on the history of the universe is a very strong one. So let's go back before we woke up on our little planet, centuries before, maybe eons before, back before the first traveler ever appeared in the galaxy, back before the Sentinels appeared. We just have the Gek, the Korvax, and the Vy'keen.
And they've all met each other, so they've all had their own little first contact situations. Yes. Okay.
The events that follow are very summarized. Each race has its own detailed telling. You can find these at different plaques and ruins in the game to uncover the three different stories: the script of the Gek, the testament of the Korvax, and the saga of the Vy'keen.
Okay.
It's a different time for all of them.
Okay.
The Gek at this time are ruled by a subspecies, the eugenically created, self-proclaimed master race known as the First Spawn.
All the freaking problematic eugenic stuff that keeps coming up in these video games. I swear, we can't escape this premise.
And they have the goal of galactic domination.
Who would have guessed that the eugenicists would be fascists as well? I mean, who didn't see that coming? Oh my gosh. It's just, anytime you say eugenics, it's just like fascism. Eugenics and fascism went to prom, and they just never stopped seeing each other.
At this point, they are very religious, and their culture involves demonic practices, witchcraft, and sacrificial ceremony.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Not the most surprising thing that it's very religious if you're going to have such a extreme belief, but at the same time, well, I guess practicing sacrifice is a great way of getting rid of enemies, the way that fascism would like you to do.
They kind of sit and wait for a long time, kind of biding their time until everything is just right, and then they basically begin advancing out from their area, the center of the galaxy.
And start conquering.
As they're doing this, an unknown entity is coming in from the outer edge that none of them know about.
Okay.
This is where the Sentinels first make their first appearance. And they kind of reach really quickly into the universe. They get very far in.
Right. I'm not surprised if they're a completely mechanical race.
Right. They were quickly spotted by the Vy'keen Alliance and were soon engaged in a decades-long war with them.
Oh, the Vy'keen were like, get off my territory.
Pretty much. And while the Vy'keen believed that they didn't have to worry about the threats of the Gek advancing onward, they had a long-standing peace treaty at this point. The Korvax intensified their efforts to move as much of the valuable knowledge out of their forward research bases back to their home system as possible before the Gek started, Yeah,
destroying their culture, exactly.
Unfortunately, such efforts were in vain. Korvax Prime was chosen as the next target by the Gek, and the Vy'keen had figured this might be the case due to the Gek's fervent wish to enhance their knowledge about demons and witches through the use of Korvax technology.
Which seems weird, because it seems like the Korvax would be the type of race that would not be engaged in those sort of occult-like tendencies.
There's a weird spirituality to the Korvax.
Oh, okay.
But they want to know. They want to know.
So it's not about the ritual, it's about
Right.
the knowledge. Okay.
Shortly after, The Gek consumed the entire planet of Corvax Prime, as well as all as the others that existed near the edge of the universe. This event was called the Great Disconnection among the Corvax. During the invasion, the Corvax's main neural networking hub, the Convergence, was almost completely annihilated, and their home and capital planet, Corvax Prime, was itself shredded into asteroid-esque chunks,
Oh my
killing billions
gosh.
of unborn and elderly Corvax alike, whose deaths were collectively witnessed by the survivors.
Oh, that's awful. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I hate that. You try to escape the genocidal tendencies and they keep coming back. Damn you, high stakes plot points.
This is all ancient history.
Better be. Genocide should always be ancient history, in my opinion.
When the Convergence was destroyed, the ancient memories of hundreds of millions of departed Corvax were erased forever within it. This act of obliteration caused horrific agony across the planet and gave its name to this period of history, that which destroyed all that had gone before.
Oh, man.
Quote from the Testament of the Corvax. The masks and shells of the Corvax survivors shook with the screams of the disconnected. Lights dimmed as the enemy descended, malevolent in its intent. Their numbers were too many. Corvax Prime was destroyed. We pick up later on. The first spawn of the Gek disconnected the Corvax. Through obliteration, they sought dominion. They stole our planet, enslaved our survivors. Their revelry made them misguided in thought and deed. Probability dictated that our time would come again. The Corvax were enslaved, driven by cruelty to fulfill the despot's bidding. The first spawn of the Gek were terrible masters, merciless in their spite, illogical in their cruelty. Countless entities toiled and disconnected. These tablets are the testament of those who survived.
Oh, man.
The first spawn saw things very differently, quoting now from the script of the Gek. The entities of the Corvax were not destroyed. The first spawn are benevolent. The first spawn are merciful. Slavery saved the worthless.
Oh,
They toiled
problematic.
for their conquerors. Their reprieve was found in servitude.
Okay. All right. Let's just put it out there. You could never say that slavery is good for anybody, because once you are forcing a sentient creature to completely act against their own free will without any trade-off, you are a horrible person. I don't care if you think that you're doing it for the betterment of history or the betterment of society. That's impossible at that point.
The Gek at this time are, I should say, the people in charge of the Gek at this time
Right.
are completely evil
Right.
and just insanely power hungry and have absolutely no objective morality.
Right. Well, again, it's very fascist, right?
Yes.
We are going to
We're the master race. We're the ones who should be in charge.
We've selected an enemy, and that enemy has to bow before us, and that enemy must be lucky if we ever give them mercy. And there is always an enemy that we have to root out. That's how fascism always works. So they have to think that way to a certain extent. And at the same time, they're still horrible people for doing it. And so, of course, if you're reading this suddenly, like, now I'm like, man, Corvax are the best now, right? Look at what they had to live through. But I'm sure there's more going on after this.
Yes. Corvax are kind of cool. Mm-hmm. All of them are kind of cool when you get there finally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you said this is ancient history by the time the game starts. Okay.
The Vy'keen noticed the Gek invasion and the Corvax subjugation. Reading from the saga of the Vy'keen now. The Vy'keen licked each other's wounds during the silence of the Sentinels, while the dishonorable Gek first spawn chose to destroy Corvax Prime. The Vy'keen condemned this crime, but lacked the strength to fight.
Ah, so they weren't able to do anything, and they were like, we know you're wrong,
Right.
but so we're going to shake our fist at you, but we're paper
They're
tight.
still fighting the Sentinels at this point.
Right, they don't have the energy or resources to do it. Okay.
As the war leader of the Vy'keen Alliance, Herc carried the great responsibility to lead the Alliance forward. Although Herc seldom discussed tactical options with his advisors during the Aeron's War, During the Sentinel War,
That word
had to
again. Oh my god.
he had to swallow his pride and ask for options. At one point, Herc even sent a messenger to consult with the Great Witch of the First Spawn to help the Vy'keen win the war, but soon realized the Gek were too busy expanding their empire. Herc was forlorn, as he had earned the trust of many Vy'keen willing to die for him fighting against the invasion. The war between the Sentinels and the Vy'keen resulted in massive casualties for both. Herc and his allies had the last laugh when the Sentinels began their retreat, but what Herc didn't expect was that the Gek did not stop with the destruction of Korvax Prime. They also wanted the power the Vy'keen wielded with their quality craftsmanship of weapons and starships.
Also very fascist that you're never done. You're always fighting. You're always at war. Whether it's with outside your walls or within your walls, there's always a war.
The Alliance hadn't yet fully recovered from the war when the Gek landed a strategic first strike from many directions, encircling the Vy'keen, who all swore to protect Herc to their last breath. Soon the Gek had Herc surrounded. Herc was shocked and suddenly roared and ended his life as an offering to the ancestors in front of the first spawn's encirclement. It is rumored that the planet Herc sacrificed himself on rained 4 days and 4 nights of hailstorms to freeze every first spawn and little metallic balls to burn everything to the ground. There is a point in the story we didn't cover here. So Herc goes to this great monolith and basically is asking for help and stuff, and basically is getting no response, and Nal is there and gets a response, and then it depends on which story you're hearing, because sometimes they both get a response, but the other one doesn't know. It just goes back and forth.
Wow.
But Nal basically is the opposite of Herc and is like another sage or teacher of, their ways. So the Gek first spawn conquered the universe, and they celebrated for days with corpses and rivers of blood.
Yikes.
There's this undercurrent that the Gek either kill their enemies with their beaks, or they eat their enemies, or it gets weird. Yeah.
Yikes. That's a lot of yikes from me, dog.
And you wouldn't expect it. Like, I thought they were just these cute, cool guys when I first played it, and then I was reading this, and I was like, what?
Literally, they had a whole ruling order of people for an era that had the biggest Napoleon complex. That's essentially what that sounds like. The most fascist Napoleon complex ever.
The Gek are celebrating and, fat off their victory. And then the Sentinels saw what was happening and saw their opportunity and came back, slowly spreading through the war-torn universe.
Right, because now that you've quote-unquote conquered everything, and this wouldn't have lasted long because, again, very fascist. Now they would be finding a new enemy probably within the walls of the Gek. The Gek that are not true Gek.
Right, which would be the low spawn.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, essentially, after the Sentinels seeing that, these guys are spreading themselves way too thin because they're too worried about fighting an enemy all the time, every day, of course they would come in and be like, now it's our time to basically kick butt and take names.
Yeah. From the saga of the Vy'keen now. The dominion of the Gek first spawn crumbled. They fell apart through idiocy and through the unchanging will of the beings they enslaved but could never understand.
Right.
Their power is but a memory, their crimes forgotten by so many. According to the testament of the Korvax, I'm not going to quote it, they believe Atlas as a creator, as a god, and that belief slowly worked its way into Gek society.
Oh.
You live with people,
right?
Beliefs
Exactly.
start merging.
Yeah, because they didn't outright kill everybody. So yeah.
In their quest for power, the first spawn approached Atlas and stood in awe. Eventually, seeing how infinitesimal they themselves were in relation to an unending universe. This very idea eventually eroded Gek society, and the low spawn turned on the first spawn.
Oh, that was bound to happen in one way or another anyway, but okay.
Eventually, a new balance was achieved. After Herc's death, the Vy'keen alliance was scattered in sorrow and despair. Some Vy'keen swore a death oath to avenge Herc and kill every single Gek until they are completely wiped clean, while some have adopted the new reality, where the Sentinels rule the universe. There are some who blame the Gek for bringing the catastrophic events upon the universe and hunt the Sentinels with unyielding ferocity. After these events, and before he awake on a little planet, the Gek became peaceful. The subspecies now a mere whisper in history. The Korvax still revere Atlas and its creation and its guardians, the Sentinels. The Vy'keen seek to bring peace to the universe, forever lamenting the Gek for allowing the Sentinels back in their moment of weakness. And this is kind of the part where it was just kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool, because the Vy'keen
Yeah.
are not the brutes.
Right.
They seek to basically remove the unstable elements and bring peace.
So that sounds like that as much as they're a culture of warriors, they're a culture more of defenders. Like, we're fighting for something. We're not fighting just to fight.
Right. And the Korvax kind of have this weird thing where their desire to learn is what brings them to Atlas. Like them looking through the casings and the remnants from the war that the Vy'keen had with the Sentinels leads them to understand that Atlas is the thing that sends the Sentinels. And the Sentinels are lower than they are, like not as advanced as the Korvax are, but are still able to hold off the Gek. They were able to win. How come?
Right.
So
at that point, it's almost like they're little spirits or angels that have come to defend them from their enslavers.
right.
Yeah. So now I can see what you mean by there's a weird spirituality that goes on with the Korvax.
Right. Plus, I was about to say something, and I don't want to say it because it gets into what we'd cover in the next episode on No Man's Sky, which isn't going to be a next episode, but eventually. Yeah. But there was definitely a lot of spirituality between all of this. And in fact, there is this weirdness of two of the races revere Atlas, and I believe it is the Gek and the Korvax now.
Right.
The Vy'keen do not.
Right.
The Vy'keen are, that thing sends the Sentinels. They are an agent of chaos. They are a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. So the Korvax were basically attacked, enslaved, and decimated by the Gek. And then the Sentinels came in and solved that problem.
Not just like decimated, like lost. It's like your race is dead, and also they burned the Library of Alexandria.
Right.
Like you have lost generations of knowledge as well.
And and then the Sentinels come and essentially exact retribution at that point, and so they be free again, and they, it's fine. The Geks essentially ate some humble pie and realized why they ate some humble pie, and also kind of had the Korvax culture to help back up this idea of revering Atlas. Where the Vy'keen would have been fine and probably would have defended themselves from the Gek if it weren't for these freaking Sentinels coming in and just messing everything up.
It is interesting now that I think about it. In the game proper, in the story proper, you have two allies who help you repeatedly, like they're people who give you missions and stuff like that and help you through the story. And part of the story is figuring out what Atlas is. And I just realized now that one of them is Gek and one of them is Korvax, and there is no Vy'keen
to
help you with that.
The Vy'keen don't care.
Right.
The Vy'keen are there to defend. They're not there to understand.
And this is all just the backstory of the game itself. This is just a summary. There's more layers that are worth to explore on your own. A lot of what we covered has always been in the game from the beginning. The script of the Gek, the testament of the Korvax, and the saga of the Vy'keen.
So you would have found that on all these planets that you would have traveled to and everything.
Right,
like
and those
that.
have been there since the first release, actually.
Okay.
But the game has been updated and continues to be updated. Atlas Rises, which was the third major update, completely revamped much of the storyline of the player character. In fact, it added much of the storyline for the player character. And there's so many mysteries and questions and ideas left to explore within No Man's Sky. And we're going to be back to this game. But to quote the game itself, and this is kind of an idea that I liked, it says, "Existence is beautiful if you let it be. Life is not a question. There does not need to be an answer."
Existentialism.
It's very much what this game is about.
And I think, have I gone on my existentialist rant on this show before? I totally forgot if I have.
I don't know.
I mean, I am more of the school of Camus existentialism. The two like if you're just vaguely looking at existentialism, dear audience, there's like Camus and then there's Sartre. And Sartre is a bit more of a nihilist. Like life means nothing and therefore stark, dark, rawr. And it kind of, then he went on this like weird, like communist bent, and it was just kind of weird for Sartre for a bit, I think. Camus, and this is why I love his story, The Stranger, is a bit more of like that there is no meaning because life is so fleeting and so short, and we are so small in this vast universe, and that is actually the beauty of it. So what you get to do when you see the absurdity that is the world is that you get to give it meaning. You get to give it purpose. And it becomes this like loving responsibility to yourself to give everything meaning. And that's the way I'd rather look at it personally.
That's very much a message of No Man's Sky as a game. Part of the thing that people don't like about this, and I'm not going to spoil the story here, but one of the things is in one of the minor themes in it is you are an explorer,
right?
So go explore.
Right.
You know, you basically, people are upset sometimes that this game doesn't have the structure of a typical game.
Right.
The reason the game exists is for you to explore.
And that is life. Let's be perfectly honest. There is no everybody out there. Let this be my little message to you all with like deep meaning, because I don't think we've done anything like this since Dear Esther, but or like Hellblade or something like that. But this, you may have been taught, you may have been told, you may have been proclaimed to that this life has a very specific purpose and meaning that you have to adhere to, whether it's, obviously you think of religion, but what if your family believes that you need to help with something, or what if your job tells you that this is the career you have to take, or this is the schooling you have to do, and you have to procreate, you have to leave this certain kind of legacy and everything like that. And just know that all the people who tell you that are lying to you, and usually also lying to themselves. You get to decide what your life is about. And as long as you're not hurting anybody else in the process, 90% of the time you're doing it just fine. So
the idea of the world or the universe is what you make it.
Yeah.
Is very much one of the central ideas that we would cover when we cover the actual story of the game. That is a very strong idea.
Yeah.
There are other layers to it, but they all come back to that central idea.
Right.
There's still a lot we have to cover.
No, we'll cover it. And I mean, and yeah, like it's kind of like what one of our favorite new YouTubers, Jessie Gender, does. Nuance is a thing.
Yeah.
She does this in her videos, and I want to make it my like text tone. Nuance is a thing. It's just such a good saying. But anyway, yeah, I already love this game, and I haven't played it yet. But I guess you guys will get to see me. Well, I should say only our patrons will see me play it the Thursday after this show releases. So patreon.com/loretogether if you want to see me get my existentialist groove on in the middle of the Euclid Galaxy.
You will wake up and you will have just a gun. And you have to survive and get to your ship.
It'll be like being born as a babe. It'll be perfectly fine.
Speaking of babes,
yeah, we should
get ours to bed.
Yeah, put them to bed.
So thank you guys for listening.
Yeah.
We will be back with another episode in 2 weeks.
Do you know what you're doing your next episode yet, Mystic?
I do not, but even if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Guys, I feel like my husband's keeping lies from me. I don't know how to feel. No.
I don't know if I'd say lies. I'd say secrets. But I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
Okay.
It's been a while since we've been to Elder Scrolls. Maybe I'll go back and do an Elder Scrolls episode. I don't know.
Oh, and if you got suggestions of what in particular you'd like, loretogether@gmail.com. And feel free to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, like we mentioned.
At Lore Together.
At Lore Together.
On both of them, right?
Yes, on both of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. Have a great week or so, and we'll see you when we figure out another universe that we're going to traverse.
Bye.
Bye.